Your cat finishes a meal, takes a few steps toward the window, and instead of curling up in the sun like usual, sits down right there and starts working on one spot near their hip. Not a quick pass, minutes. You glance over, think nothing of it, and go back to what you were doing. Cats groom. That's just what they do. Except 20 minutes later, they're back in that exact same spot again, and this time you actually watch them do it. Same leg, same patch of fur. Nowhere else on their body gets this much attention. If you've ever caught yourself noticing that kind of pattern and then talking yourself out of it, telling yourself it's probably nothing, cats are just weird about grooming sometimes. You're not wrong to wonder, but you might be asking the wrong question. The question isn't whether your cat is licking too much. It's why that particular spot, and not somewhere else. Most people think about excessive licking in pretty simple terms. Either the cat is just being a cat, or something's stressing them out. What tends to get left out of that picture is the possibility that your cat's skin is trying to tell you something, and the licking is simply the only way they know how to respond to it. That distinction matters more than it sounds like it should, because it changes what you're actually looking for. Cats are not dramatic communicators when something's bothering them physically. A dog will make discomfort obvious, limping, whining, avoiding a touch. Cats tend to handle things quietly in ways that are easy to mistake for normal behavior. A cat with an itchy patch of skin doesn't cry about it, they just go lick it, repeatedly. Which means one of the earliest, most reliable signals of a developing skin issue in a cat isn't a rash you can see. It's a habit you can notice if you know what you're looking for. Here's something that surprises a lot of people the first time they hear it. A cat's tongue is genuinely built for removal, not just cleaning. The surface is covered in small, backward curving hooks made of keratin, the same material that makes up their claws. And those hooks are extremely good at pulling loose hair and debris out of the coat. That's useful for everyday grooming. But it also means a cat can strip fur out of one small area faster than most owners expect, well before the skin underneath shows any visible sign of a problem. That's the part worth sitting with for a second. The behavior usually shows up before the evidence does. By the time you notice a thin patch or a small bald spot, the licking that caused it has often been going on for days already. So if you're waiting to see a rash before you start paying attention, you're waiting for the second sign, not the first one. The first sign is the pattern itself. A cat returning to one location on their body far more than any other, spending noticeably longer there or seeming to prioritize it over resting, eating, or playing. Ordinary grooming looks different. It moves around. A paw here, an ear there, a stretch, a pause, back to a different spot a few minutes later. It's spread out in low intensity, the kind of thing that fits quietly into the rest of a cat's day without taking it over. When one location keeps pulling a cat's attention away from everything else, that's the detail that separates routine maintenance from something worth watching more closely. Before going further, it's worth being upfront about what this video can and can't do for you. What you're getting here is general information about feline skin and grooming behavior, put together to help you notice patterns sooner and understand your own cat a little better. It can't examine your cat, and it can't tell you what's actually happening with the specific patch of fur you might be picturing right now while you listen to this. That part takes an actual look at the skin, sometimes some basic testing, and a veterinarian who can put it all together. Consider this a way to sharpen what you notice, not a substitute for someone who can put their hands on your cat. So what actually drives a cat to fixate on one spot? There isn't a single answer, and that's kind of the point. The same behavior can come from several different directions, and they don't all carry the same weight. The most common one is itch, plain and simple. Fleas are still the leading cause of skin irritation in cats in most parts of the world, and here's the detail that trips people up. A cat doesn't need a visible infestation for fleas to be the problem. Some cats develop a strong allergic reaction to flea saliva. A single bite is enough to set off intense, localized itching that can last well beyond the bite itself. So a cat who seems otherwise flea-free can still be dealing with flea-triggered irritation, especially around the lower back or the base of the tail, which happen to be common target areas for exactly this reason. Fleas aren't the only source of itch, though. Cats can also react to things in their diet or to substances they come into contact with in daily life. Certain proteins, pollen, dust, mold, even specific fabrics or cleaning products used around the house. These broader allergic skin reactions don't always look the way you'd expect an allergy to look. There's often no obvious redness or swelling in the early stages. Sometimes the only outward clue is a section of fur that's noticeably thinner than the rest, worn down slowly through repeated licking that nobody caught happening in real time. None of this means something's seriously wrong. It usually means there's a trigger somewhere, something in the environment or the diet that can typically be identified and managed once a vet has a chance to narrow it down. What it does mean is that guessing your way through it at home, switching foods, or assuming it's probably just dry skin, tends to take longer and cost more trial and error than just having it looked at properly from the start. There's a second explanation that catches a lot of owners off guard because it has nothing to do with the skin itself. Sometimes a cat licks one location because that's the spot closest to something that hurts underneath it. Veterinary behavior resources refer to this general pattern as licking tied to an internal source of discomfort, and it shows up specifically when the licking is unusually localized instead of spread across the body the way normal grooming is. Picture a cat dealing with mild back or joint discomfort, something that becomes more common as cats get into their senior years, even in cats who don't show any other obvious signs of slowing down. That cat might repeatedly groom the section of their back or flank closest to the area that's bothering them, almost like they're trying to soothe it directly. Cats experiencing bladder or urinary tract discomfort sometimes overgroom the lower belly, the inner thighs, or the area around the genitals, and from a distance, that can look exactly like anxious or compulsive licking. It isn't. It's the cat responding to something physical happening beneath the surface, in a location their tongue happens to be able to reach. This is genuinely one of the more useful things to understand from this whole topic, because it means a behavior that looks purely emotional on the outside can sometimes be rooted in something entirely physical. And it's exactly why context ends up mattering more than the licking on its own. If a cat is focused on the lower belly, and you've also noticed anything different about litter box habits, more frequent trips, straining, accidents outside the box, that combination is worth describing to a vet as a package, not treating the licking as its own separate, unrelated issue. A third possibility is simpler and more direct, something local, right there in the skin, a small wound the cat noticed before you did. An insect bite, a splinter, or grass seed lodged just under the surface, the early stages of a bacterial or fungal infection. Even mild sun exposure on a thin-furred area can cause enough irritation to send a cat back to that spot, again and again. In cases like this, the cat is essentially doing what most animals do when something bothers a specific point on their body, trying to deal with it directly with the only tool they have. And then there's the explanation that gets reached for immediately, often before anything else. Stress. It's a real phenomenon. Cats can develop repetitive, almost compulsive licking in response to anxiety, boredom, or a disruption to their routine, a move, a new pet in the house, a schedule change, tension between animals sharing a space. But here's where a lot of casual conversation about cat behavior gets ahead of itself. Veterinary sources are fairly consistent that a stress-driven diagnosis is typically reached after medical causes have been checked and ruled out, not instead of checking them. In practice, that means going straight to "she's just anxious" without first considering fleas, allergies, or a physical source of discomfort can mean missing the actual reason the behavior started. That's not dismissing stress as a factor. It's real, and for some cats, it plays a genuine role, especially cats who are naturally more sensitive to change. It just means stress tends to be one layer of a fuller picture, not the automatic first explanation the moment you notice something. Location on the body does offer a real clue, even if it's not a verdict on its own. Licking concentrated near the base of the tail, or lower back, shows up often in discussions of flea-related irritation. Focus on the belly, inner thighs, or groin area comes up repeatedly in connection with both allergic skin reactions and urinary discomfort, which is part of why vets tend to flag that particular region for closer attention. And there's a texture detail that's worth knowing too. Fur that's been removed through deliberate licking often feels short and slightly bristly, where it's been broken off close to the skin, while hair lost through a medical shedding condition tends to leave skin that feels smooth underneath. It's not something you can diagnose from, but running a gentle hand over a thin patch and noticing which one it feels like gives you something more specific to describe than "it looks kind of bald there." Symmetry matters too. Hair loss that's happening evenly on both sides of the body in a mirrored pattern tends to be associated with general overgrooming, regardless of whether the underlying trigger turns out to be itch, discomfort, or behavioral component. Hair loss that's only happening on one side in one specific spot points more towards something localized to that exact area. An injury, a bite, an infection sitting right there and nowhere else. So how do you actually keep an eye on this without turning into someone who inspects their cat 5 times a day? Start with a pattern over panic. Is the licking spread across your cat's whole body the way it normally would be? Or does it keep circling back to one particular area more than everywhere else combined? Does it happen at a specific time? After meals? Before bed? First thing in the morning? Or does it seem fairly random? Has anything changed recently with food, litter, flea prevention, or the household? Small details like these feel insignificant on their own, but stacked together, they build a picture that actually means something. Take a gentle look at the area itself in decent light, without pressing on it repeatedly, especially if your cat seems the least bit sensitive there. You're checking for thinning versus a fully bald patch, any redness, small scabs, swelling, or anything that looks wet or irritated. Pay attention to how your cat reacts when you get close to that spot too. A cat who tenses up, pulls away or reacts more strongly than usual when you approach a particular area, is telling you something worth remembering, even if the skin looks completely fine to your eye at that moment. It also helps to zoom out beyond the licking itself. Has my appetite shifted at all? Litter box habits, energy, mood, willingness to jump up onto furniture they used to get to easily? None of these need to be extreme to matter. A subtle change in one of these areas, showing up around the same time as a new licking pattern, tends to be more meaningful together than any single sign is by itself. If what you're seeing is mild, fits within what looks like normal grooming, and everything else about your cat, coat, appetite, behavior, seems steady, there's usually no reason to worry. Plenty of cats simply have a spot they favor, out of nothing more than habit. But there are a few signals that shift this from keep an eye on it to worth calling the vet fairly soon. A bald patch that's appearing or spreading over the course of days rather than weeks, skin that looks red, broken, scabbed, or has developed an odor, licking that's intense enough that your cat seems unable to stop or be distracted away from it, or any of those bigger changes, appetite, litter habits, mobility, showing up around the same time. None of this is a reason to treat every extra lick like an emergency. Cats spend a real portion of their day grooming. It's simply part of being a cat. The goal isn't hypervigilance, it's knowing what more than usual in this exact spot for this particular cat actually looks like. So if you ever notice it, you're not starting from scratch trying to figure out whether it means anything. If you do end up booking a vet visit over something like this, a little preparation goes a long way. Note roughly when you first noticed it, how the spot looks now compared to a week or two ago, whether it's one location or a few and anything else that's changed, appetite, water intake, bathroom habits, activity level. That kind of specific detail tends to be far more useful to a vet than a general, "she's been licking a lot lately," and it can genuinely shorten the path to an answer. There's something almost reassuring once this all clicks into place. Your cat isn't withholding information from you out of stubbornness. They're communicating in the only language available to them: behavior, repetition, small physical habits that are easy to overlook if you're not paying attention. Learning to read a focused grooming pattern doesn't take a veterinary degree. It just takes knowing what to actually look for, which is exactly what you've got now. And once you start paying attention to licking as a form of communication rather than background noise, it's natural to start wondering about the behavior right next to it. Scratching? A lot of people assume the two come from the same place, but they don't always. And understanding what actually separates them can change how you read what your cat is telling you. If you've ever watched your cat scratch at themselves and wondered whether it's just an itch, a habit, or something more, there's a video that goes straight into what's really going on underneath that behavior, and why the answer usually isn't what most people assume. At the end of the day, none of this is about worrying more. It's about noticing sooner. Every cat is different, and the same pattern that means very little in one cat could genuinely matter in another, which is exactly why a veterinarian who actually knows your cat's history will always be the right final word here, not a video, no matter how carefully researched it is. What you can do starting today is simply pay a little closer attention to where your cat spends their grooming time, and trust that instinct if something starts to feel different. If this helped you see your cat's habits a little more clearly, consider subscribing. There's more here built around exactly this kind of thing. The small, easy-to-miss details that end up making a real difference in the life you share with your cat.